Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Mason here from WVCW Radio, talking to Brian from Violent Femmes.
That's me.
Currently touring their 40th anniversary of their self-titled debut record. I guess on an occasion such as this, how have you been feeling on tour so far?
Well, we've been having really great attendance on the entire tour. We've been playing the first album from start to finish. We also did 3 shows with symphonies in Milwaukee and also in Grand Rapids. So we're mixing it up a little bit and connecting with the fans. I mean, they're so enthusiastic.
So since you are touring your debut album, we spoke to a folk punk band recently, AJJ, who cited that album as a sort of a seminal influence on the entire genre of folk punk. Do you consider yourselves to be a member of that scene?
Well, we were the progenitors of that scene because we were coming out of the punk era, and yet, punk was starting to become orthodox at the time that we started in the early 80s. So we had a real strong love of folk music, jazz, blues, country, bluegrass, and stuff. So we wanted to play with acoustic instruments, but have the punk energy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of bands have been influenced by that.
Mm-hmm. Are there any folk punk bands that you personally kept tabs on throughout the years?
Well, I mean, some of the more commercial bands that cite us as an influence are people like Mumford and Sons, Avett Brothers, and let me think of some other ones. Well, a lot of them do, yeah.
Thinking more on that debut record, it's, I think, fair to say that Blister in the Sun is you guys' signature song. And I think there are artists who have a flip-flopping attitude on their signature song. Jack White loves Seven Nation Army, but Nirvana hated Smells Like Teen Spirit. Where do you find yourself thinking about that song within the greater context of your career?
Well, now that you mentioned Nirvana and White Stripes, those are a couple of the other bands that were influenced by us. But, Blister in the Sun was not even released as a single at the time. Mm-hmm. It became kind of a standard over the course of many years. So it wasn't intended to be a big commercial success, but the public chose it to be. So it's really the public that determined that song was super popular, and we like the song, so we're proud of it. We're happy. We love it when we watch sporting events and they play the song. I've even seen marching bands doing it, and they saw me in the stands and they're waving at me. It's an honor and a privilege to have a song that's that popular.
It's especially a very well-noted song to be covered by bands that are influenced by you guys. Have you heard a cover or a version of it that stood out to you? I know you mentioned marching bands.
Well, a lot of people have covered it. Keith Urban covered it. Pink covered it. I mean, a lot of different artists, and I just basically like it when anybody does it. Yeah.
So you all have been touring musicians for a while now, since the 80s. Is there a change or a shift you've noticed in the act of touring, especially in the underground, from then till now?
I guess things were more independent in the early days. I mean, a lot of us didn't have any hopes for commercialism. The venues were not owned by big corporations and stuff, so it was just like little clubs. I mean, some of those still exist, but in general, the music scene has become more standardized, commercialized, and even in the case of radio, like what you do, I mean, the college radio was very influential in breaking the band and making us successful. And now, and that's because commercial radio at that time didn't even play any alternative or punk music at all. So that was college radio's domain, and now even the commercial radio stations play punk and hip hop and all kinds of stuff that they were not playing back in those days. So it's been quite a few changes in the industry since then.
And we've talked a lot about the music that you've sort of heard. What keeps you inspired? Is there music that you've heard recently, or really in general, that has kept you inspired and kept your love of music going?
Well, using the phrase love of music is appropriate because it is kind of like a love affair. You know, like you can't fall in love with somebody and then just neglect it. The relationship will fall apart. And that's the same with music. You have to keep learning, keep practicing, keep doing things. I mean, I do a lot of other music outside of the Femmes too, and some of that doesn't show up in the Femmes music, but it still inspires me. I run a music festival down in Australia, which is like, well, it's considered to be the best music festival in Australia, and I've been doing that for 16 years. So I'm constantly in touch with new up-and-coming artists, as well as a lot of the older artists who are featured because of their eminence. So you have to keep your ears open and be open-minded to what's happening around you.
So in sort of the festival atmosphere, how does the curation process, is it interesting going from, or what's the process like going from an artist to a curator of artists?
That's a good question, because at first when they asked me to put together a festival, it's called MONAFOMA, which means it's an acronym for Museum of Old and New Art, Festival of Music and Art. And that's in Tasmania in Australia. So they asked me to do a festival, and I was like, oh, I'm an artist. I'm not on the organizing end of things. But then as soon as I started doing it, I realized how creative it could be, because I was able to mix up all different styles of music. Like, we've had everything from classical music, pipe organ music, folk music, jazz, hip hop, rock music. I mean, it's been all over the place, plus art, because we're also doing art. We're doing sound art installations, and that's probably what's kept me interested in music besides playing it. It's just because it made me aware of the huge amount of creativity there is, in particular in Australia, but also worldwide. We worked with artists from every continent, including some scientists that were working out of Antarctica, so everywhere. So it's quite inspiring to me.
Thinking about that thing you mentioned earlier in relation to commercialization of the scene, in relation specifically to festivals, I think festivals have definitely taken a shift into more of a experience you go to as the internet has sort of taken over, especially in social media. Have you got any thoughts on that idea?
I think that some of the excitement that used to go towards individual bands or artists has shifted to festivals and these kinds of experiential things. People, and especially moving away from recordings into live music, which is, it's kind of good that there's a re-emphasis on live music, but that's comes at the cost of the unviability of recordings anymore, because you can't sell them because that music is available for free. But that has actually compelled artists to tour more and for promoters to focus on trying to create better experiences for the fans. Also, another thing that's changed since we started is the technology has improved. You have much better production values. The venues are nicer. You know, there are a lot of upsides to time marching on.
As a band who sort of made your initial bones on that sort of college radio route, and as you mentioned, sort of streaming, closing up the ability to sell music in that way. Do you think the path for an up-and-coming artist is sort of closing?
The path for up-and-coming artists is probably always shifting. I mean, we had a different path than the Beatles had, and they had a different path than Elvis had, and he had a different path than Frank Sinatra had, and you can keep going all the way back to the first caveman that banged on a log or something. So, I mean, I think that the young up-and-coming bands have a lot of challenges right now, but at the same time, they have a lot of opportunities. Like, for example, they can make a recording and get it out to the public instantaneously, which is something that we were not able to do 40 years ago. We would have to actually go into a studio, record it, mix it, master it, put it on vinyl, send it to the pressing plant, and wait many months until it was available. So the means of disseminating music has opened up to everybody, which is it's a two-edged sword. I mean, it means that you can't find things as easily amongst zillions of things that are being released to the public every day. But on the other hand, it's democratized things because it means that anybody can have a voice and anybody can get it out there, and you have these things like viral sensations where you don't even know really how it's happening, but through word of mouth, completely unknown artists become world famous almost overnight. I think it's a good thing in a lot of ways.
And I guess to tie it all back into itself, on the topic of sort of viral music, I know Blister in the Sun had a resurgence on TikTok a little while back. Is it an odd experience to see something that you created keep finding a new audience over and over again?
I was not aware that we had a resurgence on TikTok. Was it us or was it other people doing it?
It was the song itself.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised because I know that TikTok has a lot of movement, and that song just seems to have an ongoing ability to interest young people.
Cool. Well, thank you for talking with me today.
Thanks, Mason.
Oh, you have a question?
Hello, I'm the production manager, Oscar Muendel. I'm not a touring musician. I'm especially not a touring musician who has like a historical album who I've been playing the songs for decades, and you're still touring with the same songs. I know you said you still have a reverence for A Blister in the Sun. I'm curious how if the songs have become stale, if it's necessary to inject new things into them on tour to keep your own head in the game. Like you said, you mentioned symphonies or whatnot. I'm curious how you keep your head, if it's necessary for you to restructure songs tour after tour.
Well, that's a good question, Oscar, and there's an answer. Two of the things that we do to keep ourselves interested, even though we are playing a lot of the same songs, some new songs, is we improvise a lot. So, like within the context of the song, and you'll see this tonight, it's not exactly like we did on the record. We stretch out, we do different things with the arrangement, and that's one of the strategies we have. And the other one is we don't use a set list. On this tour, we kind of are using a set list because we're playing the first album, so that's 10 songs in a particular order. But then after that, we don't have a set list, so we could play anything. And when we're not doing the first album, we've always just done improvised set lists. So every show is different, and it's still different every night. So that's how we keep ourselves fresh and keep it fresh also for return visitors. Because we have a lot of fans that have come to even thousands of shows. So we try to keep it a little bit different every night.
Okay, so now that's been Brian from Violent Femmes. Thank you so much for talking with us. You can catch Violent Femmes will not here anymore because by the time this is out, this show has happened. But go to, I'm sorry, what was the name of the music festival again?
MONAFOMA, it's www.monafoma.net.au, and that's my festival that happens every summer in Australia, which is winter here.
Thank you all for watching. Have a good one. Go to local shows. Go out and see your scene.
Support live music.
Support live music.